Let's talk about She-Ra. As most of you know by now, I'm going through and reviewing every season of She-Ra and giving them all scores out of 10. I started this whole She-Ra reviewing thing with a big tier list a while ago, and then I followed up with a review of Season 5. I gave that one a 6 out of 10. So now, our target lies not in the finale, but in the introduction. Season 1 has to set the stage for the show, and it's what has to hook people in. I'm going to go through all the season's positive and negative aspects, seeing how well it's made, and judging it from all angles. So, starting from the very beginning, this show makes a solid entrance. The first episode, a two-parter, is packed with good characterization, especially for Catra, and great world building. The character introductions are very well done here, and the show wastes no time displaying Catra's mental turmoil instilled by none other than Shadow Weaver. While these episodes are generally bright and energetic, as most kids' shows would be, it hits with an unexpectedly real ending where we get to see the extent of the divide between Catra and Adora's personalities, again, mostly caused by Shadow Weaver. The next couple of episodes were nice, neat little bundles that advanced the linear plot, but didn't yet shove the viewers out of a comfortable episodic feel. The later half of this season's episodes are also interconnected, so the beginning half being more contained still works in terms of structure. Episode 3 introduces Madame Raz, one of the show's more important characters. Her dialogue was incredibly well made, and on rewatch, everyone in the audience can finally understand what she's talking about. The anti-war and environmental messages in these few episodes are well implemented and important to show to audiences, especially the younger ones. The introduction of characters like Mermista, Seahawk, Entrapta, and, best of all, Scorpia really helped expand this show and make future episodes more dynamic. The early mid-season episodes are pretty funny and are fun for anyone to watch, really, with their well-written visual and spoken humor. Things do take a turn around episode 7, however, changing the pacing of the season drastically. Doing this improves the season's flow and overall plot structure, making it stronger as a whole. Episode 7 takes a darker turn than the rest, exploring the extent of Shadow Weaver's abuse on Adora even after she had left the Horde. It showed how deep She-Ra would go into the psyches of their characters. The next episode, Princess Prom, is a whirlwind with an incredible range of tone. Better than that, it catapulted the plot forward and the characters along with it. Showing off Catra's true skill as a strategist as well as a fighter let the audience know that tensions would not be going down anytime soon. Catra and Adora were not on good terms, and it was frustrating, but a good driving force for the story. The next 3 episodes were all incredible and really took me aback while watching them. Rescuing Glimmer and Bow from the Horde was an excellent setup for what I thought was going to be a funny heist-style episode, but it turned into a mild psychological horror. This episode is rapid, but in a way that makes you feel exhausted, like you're part of the heist. This is mostly carried by Glimmer and Adora trapped in the Black Garnet Chamber. The voice acting here is incredible, and the episode starts showing the divide in Catra's head, which the audience can only begin to understand. This part of the season does one thing well in particular, subverting expectations. This is one of its greatest strengths, and in no way does it back down early. It just hits you hard and then keeps on going. Entrapta's arc later in the season demonstrated that well. When she was killed at first, I was shocked and then immediately remembered that she was going to be alive and they would rescue her. Of course, this was not the case. Entrapta switching sides was an excellent choice to complicate the plot and drive chaos into the mix. This show also started flexing its dialogue later, basically the entire next episode being carried by it. Every word that Catra says to Entrapta lets the audience know how much she picked up from Shadow Weaver's school of manipulation. Then a one-on-one between the two led to a crushing scene, and doubts about the Horde's integrity and capability. The tension in Bright Moon with Glimmer's glitching was surprisingly well made, and the episode did an incredible job at building the stakes, culminating in a mind-blowing pre-finale. Where do I start? Promise was just mean. There's not much I can add to that. Up until this point, the great episodes have been just that, great. This was something far better than great. The way the season set up Catra was outstanding, especially among the other parts of the show. She received so much characterization throughout every scene, and it all seemed to add up to this one episode. Every time we saw her in the Horde, she seemed to have less and less faith in those who ran it, especially Shadow Weaver. She was shown being more doubtful of her position, and then we got to Promise. She was finally alone with Adora and they had time to talk. A redemption was surely bound to happen, but a redemption would be too simple. Of course, in hindsight, it never could have happened, but this episode packs one of the most devastating punches on anyone's first watch through. Catra had been constantly abused by Shadow Weaver as a child, yet Adora was too, just in a different way. She made sure Adora would have to watch, and whenever she stepped in to protect Catra, things would get worse. As children, Adora had promised to stay with Catra, but obviously that promise was broken. Light Hope, kicking a cat while she's down, made Catra relive those memories again. You can tell that she did miss Adora, even if she was conflicted about the betrayal. Revisiting these memories only drove the wedge further in, and Catra split. Where the last episode was filled with amazing dialogue, this episode's most impactful moment comes without any. As the memory of Adora and Catra walk away, present-day Catra looks down to see her past self staring back. This was the first and only instance of a simulation directly interacting with the present characters, indicating its importance. No words are spoken, no music is played. It's simply a locking of eyes. This is essentially looking through a mirror, except adding time as another dimension. Catra is looking at what she once had, and her younger self is looking back at what she's become. So much power is displayed in this single frame, yet not a single word is spoken. Not to say that the dialogue wasn't good, it was absolutely amazing. In a previous scene, almost as good as this one, the two characters are seen splitting back and forth between past and present, having very similar arguments. It's not clear whether they're actually arguing in the past or not, but it is clear that whatever beef they have in the present is leaking back into the past. Their situation, after Catra had been threatened death by Shadow Weaver, was one that really caused turmoil between the two, and it still causes turmoil to this day. The duality of this episode is genius, and it confuses people until you get it. And this episode is amazing when you get it. The crushing end to this journey was inevitable, yet it felt so preventable too. You get to see the cogs in Catra's brain being crushed and warped in real time, and the whole structure of the episode figuratively and literally gives way. Such a fluid and real experience is deserving of anyone's respect. While the first season was good, it was at its core a first season. Many themes and ideas were rough here and didn't fully show themselves off until later. The first few episodes all seemed relatively directionless. Although it wasn't the worst thing that the beginning episodes were more episodic, it lacked a defining structure that could allow it to feel complete. The earlier dialogue seemed quite rushed and lacked a lot of realism. Episode 1 and 2 were a great intro, but many scenes felt off and a little bit too comical. The voice acting took a bit to get settled in. So many conversations felt forced or stagnant. The pacing of episodes was generally not bad, but it wasn't very interesting either. The next bit fell prey to a fundamental issue with making a show targeted towards kids. Their themes were very explicitly stated in a way that spoke down to the audience. Later on, this show would stop relying on that, but in season 1, it did it far more than necessary. Some of the character introductions were done incredibly well, but some felt a bit more neglected. Perfuma's character felt dull and underdeveloped in her first episode, as did Frosta's. While she got more characterization later, it wasn't there when it counted. Another issue is that the show was trying to touch on more serious topics, but early on it just couldn't follow through with these. Many times, unfitting dialogue would impede on an otherwise important scene, discounting its impact. Dialogue wasn't the only problem, but since the animation is Do I want to say that? Nowhere is the self-sabotage more present, however, than the finale of the series. I spent quite a long time praising Promise for the masterpiece that it is, but I intentionally ended that section there. The finale is undeniably a bad ending to the season. While it was a touching moment that all the princesses came together in the end under one big Deus Ex Machina finale and made a huge big rainbow to defeat the Horde with the power of friendship, that's all been seen and done before. This sort of ending takes away from the more nuanced messages this show had started to bring up. Promise to me wasn't just about the promise Adora made to Catra, but a promise made by the writers to the audience. By delivering a bog-standard finale, they broke said promise and the season feels unfulfilled. The final battle sequence is trying to be epic, but is filled with glaring issues like, where is Bright Moon's army? The fight with Catra was alright, but mostly pretty sloppy and over the top. Basically, this ending was a hot mess. Besides these, many of my problems with the series aren't major. Its biggest crutch isn't any of the big glaring issues, it's a general sense of mediocrity. These early episodes all felt like they needed time to be perfected. The show was still young and finding its footing, so it mostly was trying to appeal to kids, and in doing so, it traded off many interesting features for cheap jokes and fluff. This consistency to be just subpar is a major downfall for Season 1, but at least it was generally contained to that. While this season was a great foundation, it lacked many qualities that would eventually make the show great. It seemed to be profound to some extent, but only some of the time. It did, however, show great potential. My final score for this season is a 6 out of 10. If you want to see my review for Season 5, you can check that out. I ended up giving it the same score as this one. If you want to see my tier list, I did amend some of the rankings, but it is generally all the same. Anyways, go to sleep.